The origins of Hel, the half-living, half-dead ruler of the Norse underworld, trace back to one of the most complex and controversial unions in Norse mythology, the liaison between Loki, the shape-shifting trickster of the Aesir, and Angrboda, a powerful Jotun dwelling in the remote wilderness of Jotunheim. This pairing represents far more than a simple romantic entanglement between divine beings. It embodies the fundamental tensions that would ultimately tear apart the cosmos during Ragnarok. Loki's position within the pantheon of Norse gods defies simple categorization. Though counted among the Aesir and sworn as blood brother to Odin himself, Loki's nature remains fundamentally alien to the order that the gods sought to establish in the Nine Worlds. His shape-shifting abilities allowed him to transform into various creatures, mare, falcon, seal and fly among others, demonstrating a fluidity of form that reflected his equally fluid loyalties. Unlike the other Aesir, who embodies specific domains such as war, wisdom or fertility, Loki represented pure potential for change, often manifesting as chaos that could either aid or destroy. The trickster's genealogy reveals his liminal status within the divine hierarchy. Born to the Jotun Farbauti and the goddess Laufey, Loki straddled the boundary between the ordered realm of Asgard and the chaotic wilderness of Jotunheim. His very name, possibly derived from the Old Norse Logi, meaning flame, suggests his association with the transformative and destructive power of fire. This elemental connection would prove prophetic, as Loki's ultimate destiny involved leading the forces of destruction during the final conflagration of Ragnarok. Throughout the mythological narratives, Loki's relationship with the Aesir oscillates between indispensable ally and dangerous liability. His cunning repeatedly rescued the gods from predicaments, often of his own making. When the Master Builder threatened to complete Asgard's walls and claim Freya as payment, Loki's transformation into a mare and subsequent distraction of the builder's stallion, Svadilfari, saved the gods from their bargain. Yet this same incident resulted in Loki giving birth to the eight-legged horse Sleipnir, demonstrating his capacity for both solution and complication. The gods' ambivalent relationship with Loki reflects their recognition of chaos as both necessary and threatening to cosmic order. His presence among them served as a catalyst for change and growth, forcing them to adapt and evolve. However, this same chaotic energy contained within it the seeds of their eventual destruction. The Aesir's tolerance of Loki, despite his increasingly dangerous actions, suggests their understanding that attempting to eliminate chaos entirely would prove both impossible and ultimately self-defeating. Angrboda, whose name translates to she who brings grief or distress bringer, represents a figure of immense power and foreboding within the Jotun community. Unlike many giantesses who integrated themselves into Aesir society through marriage or alliance, Angrboda maintained her independence in the eastern regions of Jotunheim, far from the influence of Asgard. Her dwelling place, often described as a dark forest or iron wood called Jarnvida, served as a realm where the normal rules governing the relationship between gods and giants held little sway. The Jotnar, or giants, occupied a complex position in Norse cosmology that extended far beyond simple antagonism toward the gods. As the primordial inhabitants of the cosmos, predating the Aesir, they possessed ancient wisdom and power that the younger gods both coveted and feared. Angrboda embodied this primal force, representing the untamed aspects of nature and fate that even the gods could not fully control or comprehend. Her mastery of Saeda, the magical practice associated with prophecy and transformation, marked her as a Volva or seeress of considerable ability. The union between Loki and Angrboda occurred in the shadowy borderlands between order and chaos, divine and primordial, known and unknown. Their relationship transcended mere physical attraction, representing instead a cosmic alignment of forces that would reshape the fundamental structure of existence. Angrboda's prophetic abilities likely revealed to her the significance of their offspring, yet she proceeded with the union nonetheless, suggesting either acceptance of fate or active participation in the cosmic drama that would unfold. From this union emerged three beings whose very existence challenged the established order of the nine worlds: Hel, Fenrir the wolf, and Jormungandr the world serpent. These siblings, known collectively as Loki's children or the Monstrous brood, embodied different aspects of destruction and transformation that would play crucial roles in the eventual dissolution of the current cosmic order. Hel, the eldest of the three, manifested the liminal nature of her parentage in her very appearance. Described as half living and half dead, her body divided vertically between flesh and corpse, she embodied the boundary between life and death that her future domain would represent. Her living half appeared as a beautiful woman, while her dead half showed the decay and corruption of the grave. This duality reflected not only her mixed divine and Jotun heritage, but also her destined role as ruler of the realm where the dishonoured dead would dwell. The wolf Fenrir represented the wild, untamable aspect of nature that civilization sought to control but could never fully dominate. His rapid growth and increasing strength alarmed the gods, who recognized in him the potential for their own destruction. Unlike ordinary wolves, Fenrir possessed intelligence and speech, making him a thinking predator capable of understanding the implications of his actions. His binding by the gods using the magical chain Gleipnir demonstrated their fear of what he represented, the return of chaos and the wild to a world they had ordered according to their will. Jormungandr, the world serpent, embodied the cyclical nature of destruction and renewal that characterized Norse cosmological thinking. Cast into the sea surrounding Midgard by Odin, the serpent grew to such enormous size that it could encircle the entire world and grasp its own tail. This Ouroboros-like imagery connected Jormungandr to ancient symbols of eternal return and cosmic cycles. The serpent's position in the ocean placed it at the boundary between the known world of human habitation and the unknown realms beyond, making it a guardian of cosmic limits. The prophetic traditions surrounding these three beings reveal their integral role in the cosmic drama of Ragnarok. Völuspá and other prophetic texts describe how each would contribute to the final battle that would end the current age. Hel would provide the army of the dishonoured dead, marching from her realm to join the forces opposing the gods. Fenrir would break free from his bonds to devour Odin himself, fulfilling the prophecy that had driven the gods to bind him in the first place. Jormungandr would emerge from the ocean to poison the sky with its venom, engaging in mutual destruction with Thor. The symbolic significance of Loki and Angrboda's union, producing these agents of cosmic transformation, reflects fundamental Norse concepts about the nature of existence and change. The gods' attempt to maintain order and stability was always understood to be temporary, a holding action against the inevitable return of chaos. The children of Loki and Angrboda represented not evil in a Christian sense, but rather the natural forces of dissolution and renewal that made possible the emergence of a new cosmic order after Ragnarok. This understanding of destruction as necessary for renewal permeated Norse thinking about both individual and cosmic destiny. Just as the seasons cycled from growth to decay to rebirth, so too would the cosmos itself undergo periodic dissolution and recreation. The monstrous children of Loki and Angrboda served as agents of this cosmic necessity, embodying forces that the gods could delay but never permanently defeat. The gods' response to the prophecies surrounding Loki's children reveals their tragic understanding of fate's inexorable nature. Despite knowing that their actions to prevent Ragnarok would ultimately contribute to its fulfillment, they proceeded nonetheless, bound by their nature as forces of order to oppose chaos, even when such opposition proved counterproductive. Their binding of Fenrir, casting out of Jormungandr, and eventual banishment of Hel to the Underworld, represented not solutions, but rather the playing out of cosmic roles that had been established since the beginning of time. The physical manifestation of Hel represents one of the most striking and symbolically complex descriptions found within the corpus of Norse mythological texts. Her appearance, as recorded primarily in Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda, defies conventional understanding of divine beauty and challenges the typical representations of both gods and giants within the Norse pantheon. Unlike the radiant perfection associated with deities such as Balder, or the fierce magnificence attributed to warrior gods like Thor, Hel's form embodies a fundamental contradiction that mirrors her unique position within the cosmic order. The most detailed account of Hel's appearance emerges from the Gylfaginning section of the Prose Edda, where Snorri describes her as being half blue-black and half flesh-coloured. This description, while seemingly straightforward, contains layers of meaning that extend far beyond mere physical characteristics. The division occurs along a vertical plane, splitting her body into two distinct halves that represent opposing states of existence. One side displays the warm flesh tones and vital appearance of the living, complete with the subtle movements and expressions that mark animate beings. The other half exhibits the blue-black discoloration characteristic of corpses, particularly those that have begun the process of decomposition or have been exposed to extreme cold. Medieval Icelandic sources provide additional details that enhance our understanding of this remarkable duality. The living half of Hel's body functions as any normal divine form would, with flesh that responds to touch, eyes that reflect intelligence and emotion, and features that move with natural grace. Her living eye observes the world with the penetrating gaze inherited from her divine lineage, capable of perceiving truths hidden from lesser beings. The living side of her mouth speaks with authority befitting her station as ruler of a vast realm, while her living hand gestures with the measured movements of one accustomed to command. In stark contrast, the corpse-like half presents a vision that would disturb even the most battle-hardened warriors of the Viking Age. The dead flesh appears mottled with the dark hues that mark advanced decay, creating patterns across her skin that shift between deep purples, blacks, and the sickly greens associated with putrefaction. This half of her body moves with the stiffness of rigor mortis, creating an unsettling juxtaposition when combined with the fluid grace of her living side. The dead eye appears clouded and unfocused, yet somehow still perceives the realm of the deceased with clarity beyond that of the living. The symbolic significance of this physical duality extends throughout Norse cosmological thinking, representing the fundamental boundary that Hel governs between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Her very form serves as a living embodiment of the threshold she controls, making her uniquely qualified to judge and rule over those who have passed from life into death. This physical manifestation of her domain creates an immediate visual understanding of her authority that transcends the need for elaborate explanations or demonstrations of power. The division between life and death represented in Hel's appearance reflects broader Norse concepts about the nature of existence itself. The living half embodies the vitality, growth, and potential that characterize the upper worlds where gods and humans dwell. The dead half represents not merely absence of life, but rather a different state of being that possesses its own forms of power and significance. This understanding differs markedly from later Christian concepts that view death primarily as absence or negation, instead presenting it as a transformation into a different but equally valid state of existence. Artistic interpretations of Hel's appearance in medieval Scandinavian sources reveal the profound impact her physical form had on contemporary imagination. Carved stone monuments and wooden artifacts from the Viking Age occasionally depict figures that scholars have identified as possible representations of Hel, showing the characteristic division between living and dead halves. These artistic works demonstrate the technical challenges faced by craftsmen attempting to represent such a complex duality within the constraints of their medium. The Gosforth cross in Cumbria, England, dating to the 10th century, includes carved panels that some scholars interpret as depicting scenes from Norse mythology, including possible representations of Hel's realm. While the identification remains debated, the artistic techniques employed to show figures existing in states between life and death provide insight into how medieval artists conceptualize these liminal beings. The use of contrasting textures, depths of carving, and symbolic elements suggests sophisticated understanding of the theological and cosmological implications of Hel's dual nature. Literary descriptions in skaldic poetry and Eddic verse employ various kennings and metaphors to capture the essence of Hel's appearance, without always providing explicit physical details. References to her as half-goddess of the grave cold and she who shares flesh with corpses create poetic images that emphasize the unsettling nature of her form, while maintaining the elevated language appropriate to divine beings. These poetic treatments reveal how Norse poets struggled to find adequate language for describing something that challenged conventional categories of existence. The fearsome aspect of Hel's visage serves multiple functions within the mythological narrative structure. Her appearance immediately establishes her authority over death and the dead, creating a visual representation of power that requires no demonstration through action or speech. Warriors and gods alike recognize in her form the inevitable fate that awaits all living beings, making her presence a constant reminder of mortality, even in the halls of the immortal Aesir. The psychological impact of encountering Hel's dual form appears throughout various mythological narratives, most notably in the account of Hermodra's journey to retrieve Balder from her realm. The messenger god's reaction to first seeing Hel establishes the profound effect her appearance has even on divine beings accustomed to supernatural sights. The text describes his initial hesitation and the effort required to approach her throne, suggesting that even gods find her physical presence challenging to confront directly. The practical implications of Hel's divided appearance extend to her role as judge and ruler of the dead. Her living half enables her to understand and empathize with the concerns of those who still possess life, while her dead half grants her intimate knowledge of the experiences and needs of the deceased. This dual perspective makes her uniquely qualified to mediate between the worlds of the living and the dead, serving as a bridge between states of existence that normally remain separate and incomprehensible to each other. The clothing and adornments described in various sources further emphasize the duality of Hel's nature. Some accounts describe her as wearing garments that reflect her divided state, with rich fabrics and precious metals adorning her living side, while her dead half remains draped in the simple shrouds associated with burial. This sartorial division reinforces the visual impact of her physical duality, while demonstrating her mastery over both the material wealth of the living and the stark simplicity of death. The architectural environment of Hel's Hall, Eljudnir, reflects and amplifies the visual impact of her divided appearance. The building itself incorporates elements that mirror her dual nature, with portions constructed from materials associated with life and growth, alongside sections built from bones, grave goods, and other materials connected to death and burial. This environmental reinforcement of her physical characteristics creates a cohesive aesthetic that emphasizes the fundamental themes of her domain. The genealogical implications of Hel's appearance connect her physical form to both sides of her divine heritage. The living half can be understood as reflecting her connection to Loki, and through him to the divine order of the Aesir. The dead half represents her inheritance from Angrboda and the primordial forces of dissolution and transformation associated with the Jotnar. This physical manifestation of her mixed heritage makes visible the complex relationships between order and chaos, creation and destruction that characterize her family line. The temporal aspects of Hel's appearance raise intriguing questions about the nature of divine embodiment and the relationship between physical form and cosmic function. Unlike mortal beings whose appearance changes over time through aging, injury, or death, Hel's divided state appears fixed and eternal, representing not a moment in time but rather a permanent condition that transcends normal temporal limitations. This static quality emphasises her role as a constant presence at the boundary between life and death, unchanging while presiding over the endless flow of souls from one state to another. The cosmic order that the Aesir had laboured to establish across the 9 worlds faced its gravest threat not from external enemies or natural catastrophes, but from the prophetic knowledge that revealed the inevitable destruction awaiting all divine realms. The Volva's revelation of Loki's monstrous offspring and their destined roles in Ragnarok created an unprecedented crisis within Asgard's halls, forcing Odin the All-Father to confront the fundamental paradox of fate. The more the gods struggled against their prophesied doom, the more certainly they ensured its fulfillment. The prophecy emerged during one of Odin's many consultations with the Valur, the powerful seeresses whose mastery of cedar magic granted them access to the threads of weird that bound all existence together. These consultations typically occurred in sacred groves or at the edges of wells associated with the wisdom and prophecy, places where the barriers between present knowledge and future sight grew thin enough for skilled practitioners to perceive what was to come. The particular Volva who delivered this devastating revelation remains unnamed in most sources, though her authority and accuracy were never questioned by those who heard her words. The seeress described in vivid detail how 3 beings born of Loki and Angrboda would serve as primary agents in the destruction of the current cosmic order. Her vision revealed Fenrir the wolf, growing beyond all natural bounds, his strength eventually surpassing that of the gods themselves until he could devour Odin during the final battle. She saw Jormungandr the world serpent encircling Midgard in the ocean's depths, destined to emerge and poison the very sky with its venomous breath while engaging Thor in mutual destruction. Most disturbing of all, she perceived Hel gathering an army of the dishonoured dead in her realm beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, preparing to march alongside the forces of chaos when the final war commenced. The Volva's description of these events carried the weight of inevitable truth that characterised all genuine prophetic utterances. She spoke not of possibilities or potential futures, but of events already woven into the fundamental structure of reality. Her words described Hel's role with particular clarity, revealing how the half-living, half-dead daughter of Loki would command legions of those who died without honour in battle, providing crucial reinforcements for the armies opposing the gods. The prophecy specified that these dishonoured dead would march from Hel's realm in a ship constructed entirely from the fingernails of corpses, a vessel called Naglfar that would carry them to the final battlefield. Odin's response to this prophetic revelation demonstrated both his wisdom and the tragic limitations that bound even the wisest of the gods. The All-Father understood immediately that direct attempts to prevent the prophecy's fulfillment would likely accelerate its realization, yet his nature as protector of cosmic order compelled him to act nonetheless. His decision-making process involved extensive consultation with other members of the Aesir Council, though the ultimate responsibility for action rested with him as ruler of Asgard. The All-Father's initial strategy focused on separation and containment rather than destruction. Odin recognized that killing Loki's children would accomplish nothing beyond hastening the very catastrophe he sought to prevent, since their deaths would only serve to further alienate Loki from the divine community and push him more quickly toward his destined role as leader of the forces of destruction. Instead, Odin chose to remove the 3 siblings from environments where they might grow in power or influence, hoping to delay their prophesied roles through isolation and control. The capture of Loki's children required careful planning and overwhelming force, since each possessed supernatural abilities that made them formidable opponents despite their youth. The operation began with extensive reconnaissance conducted by Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin, who observed the siblings in their dwelling place within Jotunheim's wilderness. These observations revealed the rapid growth and increasing power of all 3 beings, confirming the Volva's warnings about their potential threat to divine authority. The actual capture occurred through a coordinated assault involving multiple Aesir working in concert to overwhelm each sibling's defences. Fenrir's capture proved particularly challenging due to his intelligence and growing suspicion of divine motives, requiring the gods to employ deception alongside force. The wolf's binding with the magical chain Gleipnir represented one of the most significant magical undertakings in Norse mythology, involving materials that existed only in the liminal spaces between reality and impossibility. Jormungandr's removal followed a different pattern, with Odin personally casting the serpent into the ocean surrounding Midgard. This action served multiple purposes. It removed the growing threat from proximity to the divine realms, while simultaneously placing the serpent in an environment where its growth would serve a cosmic function as the boundary between the known world and the chaotic waters beyond. The serpent's eventual size, large enough to encircle the entire world, transformed it into a living representation of cosmic limits. Hel's capture and judgment presented unique challenges due to her liminal nature and the complex legal questions surrounding her status within the cosmic order. Unlike her brothers, who could be classified clearly as threats requiring containment, Hel's dual nature as both living and dead created ambiguity about her proper treatment under divine law. The Aesir Council's deliberations regarding her fate extended over several sessions, with different gods arguing for various approaches to the problem she represented. The Council's examination of Hel's case revealed fundamental disagreements about the nature of justice and the proper response to prophetic knowledge. Some council members, led by Tyr, the god of justice and law, argued for treating her according to established legal precedents governing divine beings who pose potential threats to cosmic order. Others, including Frigg and several of the goddesses, advocated for considering her youth and the fact that she had committed no actual crimes beyond existing in a form that prophecy suggested would prove dangerous. Odin's final decision regarding Hel reflected his understanding of both practical necessity and symbolic significance. Rather than attempting to imprison or destroy her, he chose to grant her dominion over a realm where her dual nature would serve a cosmic function. The assignment of Niflheim as her domain represented not punishment, but rather recognition of her unique qualifications for ruling over the dead. Her physical division between life and death made her the ideal candidate for managing the complex relationships between the world of the living and the realm of the deceased. The symbolic significance of casting Hel into Niflheim extended far beyond simple exile or containment. Odin's decision transformed what could have been viewed as punishment into an elevation to divine rulership, making Hel the sovereign of one of the 9 worlds. This elevation served multiple purposes within the cosmic order. It provided appropriate governance for the realm of the dead, it utilized Hel's unique nature for a beneficial purpose, and it created a buffer zone between the living worlds and the primordial chaos that lay beyond the roots of Yggdrasil. Niflheim itself possessed characteristics that made it particularly suitable for Hel's dominion. The realm existed in a state of perpetual twilight, neither fully light nor completely dark, mirroring the liminal nature of death as a transition between states rather than a simple ending. The landscape consisted of vast plains shrouded in mist, with rivers whose waters carried the essence of dissolution and transformation. Ancient sources describe these waters as having the power to erode even the strongest materials over time, representing the inevitable decay that awaited all things in the physical world. The assignment of specific responsibilities within her new domain demonstrated Odin's careful consideration of how Hel's rule would function within the broader cosmic order. She received authority over all those who died of sickness or old age, as well as those who perished without the honour that would grant them entry to Valhalla or Folkvanga. This division of the dead between different realms reflected Norse understanding of death as a complex process with multiple possible outcomes, rather than a single universal destination. Hel's new role required her to establish systems of governance and judgment that would manage the endless flow of souls entering her domain. The construction of her hall, Eljudnir, represented one of her first major undertakings as ruler of Niflheim. The hall's architecture reflected both her dual nature and the needs of her diverse population of deceased souls. The building incorporated elements from both the world of the living and the realm of the dead, creating a structure that could accommodate beings in various states of existence. The establishment of Hel's court system required careful consideration of how justice should function in a realm populated by the dead. Unlike the living, who could be motivated by hopes of reward or fears of punishment, the deceased required different approaches to governance and social order. Hel's unique perspective, derived from her dual nature, enabled her to understand both the concerns of those who retained connections to life and the needs of those who had fully transitioned to death. The practical implications of Hel's elevation to rulership created ripple effects throughout the 9 worlds that extended far beyond the immediate concerns of managing the dead. Her new status as a legitimate ruler required other divine beings to treat her as an equal, rather than as a contained threat, establishing diplomatic protocols that would govern interactions between her realm and the other worlds. These protocols would prove crucial during later events, particularly when the gods required her cooperation in matters affecting the cosmic order. The transformation of Loki's daughter from potential threat to cosmic ruler represented one of Odin's most sophisticated responses to prophetic knowledge. Rather than attempting to fight fate directly, the All-Father chose to work within the constraints imposed by prophecy, while seeking to minimize its most destructive aspects. His decision to grant Hel legitimate authority over death itself created a situation where her prophesied role in Ragnarok would be tempered by her responsibilities as a ruler with subjects to protect and a realm to govern. The long-term consequences of this decision would extend throughout the remaining mythological narratives, influencing events ranging from Baldur's death to the final preparations for Ragnarok. Hel's position as ruler of the dead granted her unique leverage in cosmic affairs, making her cooperation essential for any divine undertaking that involved the boundary between life and death. This leverage would prove particularly significant when the gods sought to retrieve Baldur from her realm, creating a situation where their past treatment of her would directly influence their ability to undo one of the most tragic losses in Norse mythology. The establishment of Hel's dominion over the realm of the dead necessitated a complete transformation of what had previously been known as Niflheim into the more complex and structured domain that would come to be called Helheim. This metamorphosis represented far more than a simple change of rulership. It involved the fundamental reorganization of cosmic geography to accommodate the needs of both the living and the dead, while maintaining the delicate balance that prevented the complete dissolution of the barriers between worlds. Helheim's position within the cosmological structure of the 9 worlds occupies one of the most strategically significant locations in all of Norse mythology. The realm sits beneath the 3rd root of Yggdrasil, the world tree whose massive trunk and sprawling branches connect all planes of existence. This placement grants Helheim direct access to the cosmic axis, while simultaneously positioning it at the furthest remove from Asgard and the other divine realms. The route that extends into Helheim draws nourishment from the well Hvergelmir, the primordial spring from which all rivers ultimately flow, creating a connection between Hel's domain and the fundamental sources of cosmic power. The relationship between Helheim and its predecessor realm, Niflheim, demonstrates the complex layering that characterizes Norse cosmological thinking. Niflheim, whose name translates to Mist World or Dark World, existed as one of the 2 primordial realms present before the creation of the cosmos. This ancient domain of ice, mist, and primordial cold provided the foundation upon which Hel would build her more structured kingdom. Rather than replacing Niflheim entirely, Helheim incorporated the older realm as its deepest and most remote region, preserving the connection to primordial forces while adding the organizational structures necessary for governing the dead. The geographical boundaries of Helheim extend far beyond what most sources explicitly describe, encompassing vast territories that accommodate different categories of the deceased according to their manner of death and moral conduct during life. The realm's northern regions retain much of Niflheim's original character, with endless fields of ice and snow where the most ancient dead dwell, in conditions that mirror the primordial state of the cosmos before creation. These areas serve as repositories for souls whose deaths predate the establishment of more sophisticated systems of judgment and categorization. The central regions of Helheim, where Hel established her primary seat of power, feature a landscape that reflects the dual nature of death itself. Rolling plains covered in pale grass stretch towards horizons shrouded in perpetual twilight, neither fully dark nor completely illuminated. The vegetation in these areas grows without the warmth of sunlight, sustained instead by the peculiar energies that emanate from the realm's connection to Yggdrasil's root system. Trees with silver bark and leaves that shimmer between green and grey provide shelter for the countless souls who wander these territories, seeking resolution for the unfinished business that binds them to existence. The River Gjoll represents one of the most significant geographical features within Helheim, serving as both a physical barrier and a symbolic threshold that separates the realm of the dead from the world of the living. This mighty watercourse flows with tremendous force through the heart of Hel's domain, its waters carrying the essence of dissolution and transformation that characterizes the boundary between life and death. The river's name, meaning loud or resounding, reflects the thunderous roar of its current as it carries away the remnants of mortal existence. The waters of Gjoll possess properties that distinguish them from any river found in the worlds of the living. The liquid appears neither fully transparent nor completely opaque, instead maintaining a quality that seems to shift between states depending upon the observer's perspective and spiritual condition. Living beings who attempt to touch these waters experience a profound chill that penetrates beyond physical sensation, reaching into the very essence of their life force. The dead, however, find the river's flow neither warm nor cold, but rather neutral, in a way that reflects their transition beyond the physical sensations that characterize mortal existence. The bridge Gjallabru spans the River Gjoll at its narrowest point, providing the primary means of crossing from the outer regions of Helheim toward the central areas where Hel maintains her court. This structure, whose name combines Gjoll with Bru, meaning bridge, represents one of the most impressive architectural achievements in any of the 9 worlds. Constructed from materials that exist in the liminal space between life and death, the bridge appears solid enough to support the weight of countless souls while maintaining a translucent quality that allows observers to perceive the rushing waters below. The bridge's construction incorporates elements that reflect both the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The foundation pillars extend deep into the riverbed, anchored in stones that have absorbed the essence of countless souls who have passed over them. The deck consists of planks hewn from trees that grew in the borderlands between worlds, their wood possessing the strength of living timber combined with the permanence of death. Rails carved with intricate patterns provide guidance for souls making their first crossing, the design serving both decorative and functional purposes by helping the recently deceased maintain their orientation during the disorienting transition into death. The maiden Modguda stands eternal watch over Gjallabru, serving as both guardian and guide for souls seeking passage into the deeper regions of Helheim. Her name, meaning furious battle or courage in battle, initially seems incongruous for a figure associated with the peaceful transition into death. However, this apparent contradiction reflects the Norse understanding that death itself represents a form of battle, requiring courage and determination to face the unknown territories that lie beyond mortal existence. Modguda's appearance reflects her unique role as mediator between the living and the dead. Unlike Hel, whose form displays the stark division between life and death, the Bridge Guardian maintains the appearance of a living being while possessing the wisdom and authority that come from intimate knowledge of death's mysteries. Her clothing consists of garments that shift between the rich fabrics favoured by the living and the simple, shrouds associated with burial, the transformation occurring so subtly that observers often cannot determine exactly when the change takes place. The Guardian's duties extend far beyond simple toll collection or access control. Modguder serves as the first official representative of Hel's authority that newly deceased souls encounter, making her responsible for providing initial orientation and guidance during one of the most disorienting experiences possible. Her conversations with the dead serve multiple purposes. They help souls understand their new condition, they provide information about the structure and customs of Helheim, and they allow Modguder to assess each individual's needs and appropriate placement within the realm's complex social hierarchy. The questioning process that Modguder conducts reveals sophisticated understanding of the psychological and spiritual challenges faced by the recently deceased. She inquires about the manner of each soul's death, not from curiosity or administrative necessity, but to help them process the transition they have undergone. Her questions about family, accomplishments, and regrets serve therapeutic functions, allowing the dead to begin the process of accepting their new existence while maintaining connections to the meaningful aspects of their mortal lives. Modguder's authority to grant or deny passage across Jalabru operates according to principles that reflect Hel's justice rather than arbitrary power. Souls who approach the bridge with acceptance of their condition and respect for the customs of the dead typically receive immediate permission to cross. Those who arrive in states of confusion, denial, or hostility toward their circumstances may be required to spend time in the outer regions of Helheim until they achieve the psychological preparation necessary for deeper integration into the realm's society. The architectural marvel of Hel's Hall, Eljudnir, dominates the central region of Helheim like a mountain peak rising from the misty plains. The hall's name, meaning sprayed with snowstorms or damp with sleet, reflects both its physical appearance and its symbolic function as a place where the cold reality of death meets the warmth of continued existence. The structure's massive scale accommodates the countless souls who seek audience with Hel while providing appropriate grandeur for one of the 9 worlds' most important rulers. The approach to Eljudnir follows a carefully planned route that reinforces the solemnity and significance of entering Hel's presence. The path begins at the bridge Gjalarbru and proceeds through increasingly formal landscapes that prepare visitors for the awesome responsibility of addressing the ruler of the dead. Gardens filled with plants that bloom without sunlight line the walkway, their pale flowers providing beauty that transcends the normal requirements of living vegetation. Statues commemorating significant figures from the history of death and dying mark important waypoints along the route, serving both as landmarks and as reminders of the continuity that connects all souls who pass into Hel's domain. The threshold of Eljudnir, known as Falandaforad, represents one of the most magically significant architectural features in Norse mythology. The name, meaning falling to peril or stumbling block, indicates the threshold's function as a final test for those seeking entry to Hel's Hall. Unlike ordinary doorways that simply separate interior from exterior space, Falandaforad serves as a barrier between different states of existence, requiring those who cross it to fully accept their condition as inhabitants of the realm of the dead. The physical structure of Falandaforad incorporates materials and design elements that emphasize its function as a transformative boundary. The threshold stone consists of a single massive block carved from rock that formed at the moment of the cosmos's creation, its surface worn smooth by the passage of countless souls over the ages. Runes inscribed along the stone's edges provide both identification and protection, marking the boundary of Hel's authority while preventing unauthorized access to her hall. The magical properties of Falandaforad manifest differently depending upon the nature of those who attempt to cross it. The dead experience a sense of homecoming and acceptance as they step across the threshold, finding themselves welcomed into a space designed specifically for their needs and circumstances. Living beings who cross Valanderforad undergo a more complex transformation, temporarily taking on aspects of death that allow them to function within Hell's Hall, while maintaining their essential nature as inhabitants of the world above. The interior architecture of Eljudnir reflects Hell's dual nature through the careful integration of elements associated with both life and death. The main hall features soaring ceilings supported by pillars carved from trees that grew at the boundary between worlds, their wood possessing the strength of living timber combined with the permanence of death. Tapestries depicting scenes from the history of mortality hang from the walls, their images shifting subtly to reflect the experiences and memories of those who observe them. The furnishings within Eljudnir demonstrate the sophisticated craftsmanship available to Hel through her dominion over all who have died with skills in metalworking, wood carving and textile production. Tables constructed from materials that exist only in the realm of the dead provide surfaces that remain stable, regardless of the spiritual condition of those who use them. Chairs designed to accommodate beings in various states of corporeal existence ensure that all visitors can participate comfortably in the hall's activities. Hel's throne occupies the position of greatest honour within Eljudnir, elevated on a dais that provides clear sightlines throughout the hall while emphasising her authority over all who enter her presence. The throne itself incorporates design elements that reflect her unique position as ruler of the dead, with one armrest carved from living wood that continues to grow and change, while the other consists of bone that has been polished to mirror-like smoothness. The seat cushions shift between rich fabrics and simple burial shrouds, adapting to Hel's dual nature while providing appropriate comfort for extended periods of judgment and administration. The various regions within Helheim accommodate different categories of the dead according to sophisticated systems of classification that reflect Norse understanding of moral responsibility and cosmic justice. The central areas near Eljudnir house those who died natural deaths without particular honour or dishonour, providing them with comfortable existence that mirrors the best aspects of mortal life without its limitations and sufferings. These souls engage in activities that bring them satisfaction and fulfilment, pursuing interests and relationships that were meaningful during their earthly existence. The northern regions of Helheim, where the influence of ancient Niflheim remained strongest, serve as dwelling places for those whose deaths involve particular dishonour or moral failure. The landscape in these areas reflects the harsh judgment that Norse society passed upon certain categories of wrongdoing, with conditions that emphasise the consequences of actions taken during mortal life. However, even these regions operate according to principles of justice rather than arbitrary punishment, providing opportunities for redemption and growth that allow souls to improve their circumstances through effort and moral development. Nastrond, the Corpshaw, represents the most severe region within Helheim, reserved for those who committed the most serious crimes during their mortal existence. This area features a hall constructed entirely from the bodies of venomous serpents, their fangs pointing inward to create a constantly threatening environment for its inhabitants. The hall faces north, away from any source of warmth or comfort, emphasising the isolation that results from serious moral failure. Oath-breakers, murderers, and those who violated the most sacred trusts of Norse society find themselves assigned to Nastrond, where they must confront the full consequences of their actions. The administration of justice within these various regions requires sophisticated understanding of individual circumstances and moral complexity. Hel's court includes advisors and administrators drawn from among the dead who possessed wisdom and judgment during their mortal lives, creating a bureaucracy that can handle the endless variety of cases that arise when dealing with the full spectrum of human moral experience. These officials work to ensure that each soul receives treatment appropriate to their individual circumstances, while maintaining the overall order necessary for governing such a vast and diverse population. The complex system governing who enters Helheim versus other afterlife destinations reveals the sophisticated Norse understanding of death as a multifaceted process rather than a single universal outcome. The primary division of the deceased operated according to the fundamental distinction between those who died in battle and those who perished through other means. But this basic categorization encompassed numerous subtle variations that reflected the intricate moral and social hierarchies of Norse society. Warriors who fell in combat while displaying exceptional courage and skill earned the right to enter either Valhalla, Odin's magnificent hall, or Folkvangr, the field belonging to the goddess Freyja. The selection process for these honoured destinations involved divine choosers known as Valkyries, supernatural maidens who observed battles from above and identified those whose deaths demonstrated the martial virtues most valued by Norse culture. The Valkyries' judgment considered not merely the fact of dying in battle, but the manner in which warriors faced their deaths, their conduct throughout the fighting, and their adherence to the codes of honour that governed warrior society. Valhalla received those warriors whose deaths served Odin's specific purposes in preparing for Ragnarok, particularly those whose combat skills and tactical knowledge would prove valuable in the final battle against the forces of chaos. These Einherjar, or lone fighters, spent their afterlife in constant preparation for the ultimate conflict, engaging in daily combat that honed their abilities while feasting each evening on mead and the flesh of the boar Eljudnir, which renewed itself each day to provide sustenance for the growing army of the dead. Folkvangr attracted warriors whose deaths demonstrated qualities that Freyja valued, particularly those who combined martial prowess with the wisdom and magical knowledge associated with her dominion over cedar magic. The goddess's selection criteria emphasized not only battlefield courage, but also the intellectual and spiritual qualities that would prove valuable in the complex magical workings necessary for cosmic defense. Warriors assigned to Folkvangr engaged in training that combined physical combat with magical practice, developing skills that complemented those being cultivated in Valhalla. The remaining dead, comprising the vast majority of souls departing the world of the living, fell under Hel's jurisdiction according to principles that reflected both practical necessity and cosmic justice. This category included all those who died of disease, old age, accidents or other causes that did not involve honourable combat, as well as warriors whose battlefield deaths failed to meet the exacting standards applied by the Valkyries. The diversity of circumstances that led souls to Helheim required Hel to develop sophisticated systems of classification and treatment that could accommodate the full spectrum of human experience and moral conduct. Hel's role as judge and ruler of the dead extended far beyond simple administrative oversight, encompassing responsibilities that made her one of the most powerful figures in Norse cosmology. Her unique position as the only major divine figure who combined aspects of both life and death granted her unparalleled insight into the needs and concerns of souls transitioning between states of existence. This dual perspective enabled her to serve as mediator between the world of the living and the realm of the dead, making decisions that affected not only individual souls, but the cosmic balance that maintained stability across all 9 worlds. The judicial process within Helheim operated according to principles that balanced individual circumstances against broader cosmic necessities, taking into account factors ranging from the manner of death to the moral conduct displayed throughout mortal life. Hel's court sessions involved detailed examination of each soul's history, conducted with the assistance of advisors who possessed expertise in various aspects of law, morality, and cosmic order. These proceedings aimed not merely to assign appropriate punishments or rewards, but to determine the most beneficial placement for each individual within the complex social structure of the realm of the dead. The concept of straw death versus weapon death provided one of the fundamental organizing principles for determining afterlife destinations, reflecting the Norse emphasis on courage and martial valor as defining characteristics of honorable existence. Weapon death, involving mortality caused by edged weapons, spears, arrows, or other implements of war, carried connotations of honour and active engagement with fate that elevated the deceased above those who succumbed to what were perceived as more passive forms of mortality. Straw death encompassed all forms of mortality that occurred without direct combat, including death from illness, old age, accidents, or other circumstances that did not provide opportunities for displaying martial courage. The term itself derived from the practice of placing straw beneath dying individuals to provide comfort during their final moments, emphasizing the domestic and peaceful nature of such deaths, in contrast to the violent glory associated with battlefield mortality. While straw death did not carry the dishonour associated with cowardice or moral failure, it also lacked the elevated status that weapon death conferred upon the deceased. The practical implications of this distinction extended throughout Norse society, influencing everything from funeral practices to legal proceedings involving inheritance and social status. Families whose members died weapon deaths gained prestige that could affect their standing within the community for generations, while those who experienced straw deaths required different forms of commemoration and remembrance to maintain their honour within the social hierarchy. However, the application of these principles involved considerable nuance that reflected the complexity of human experience and moral judgment. Hell's Court recognised that circumstances beyond individual control could affect the manner of death, leading to provisions that allowed for exceptional treatment of souls whose straw deaths occurred under conditions that demonstrated courage, sacrifice, or other virtues valued by Norse society. Women who died in childbirth, for example, received recognition for the courage required to face the dangers of bringing new life into the world, while individuals who perished while attempting to save others from natural disasters earned consideration for their selfless actions. The daily existence of the dead within Hell's domain varied considerably according to their individual circumstances and the region of Helheim where they resided. Those assigned to the central areas near Eljudnir enjoyed conditions that replicated the best aspects of mortal life without its limitations and sufferings. These souls engaged in activities that brought them fulfillment and satisfaction, pursuing interests and relationships that had provided meaning during their earthly existence, while exploring new possibilities that became available through their transformed state. The social structure within these regions reflected the values and hierarchies of Norse society, while adapting them to the unique circumstances of death. Former jarls and other nobility maintained positions of respect and authority, but their power derived from wisdom and moral character rather than inherited wealth or political control. Skilled craftsmen continued practicing their trades, creating works of a beauty and utility that served the needs of their fellow dead, while expressing their artistic vision through materials and techniques unavailable in the world of the living. Agricultural activities within Helheim followed patterns that mirrored but transcended mortal farming practices, with crops that grew without seasonal limitations and livestock that provided sustenance without requiring slaughter. The dead who had been farmers during their mortal lives found satisfaction in tending fields that produced harvests according to need rather than natural cycles, while those who had worked with animals discovered that their charges possessed intelligence and communication abilities that transformed the relationship between herder and flock. The more remote regions of Helheim, where the influence of ancient Niflheim remained strongest, housed souls whose deaths involved particular dishonour or moral failure according to Norse standards of conduct. The conditions in these areas reflected the harsh judgment that the culture passed upon certain categories of wrongdoing, but they operated according to principles of justice and potential redemption rather than arbitrary punishment. Souls assigned to these regions faced challenges and hardships that corresponded to their moral failures while providing opportunities for growth and eventual improvement of their circumstances. The administration of these varied regions required constant attention to individual needs and circumstances, leading Hell to establish an extensive bureaucracy staffed by the dead who had possessed administrative skills and moral wisdom during their mortal lives. These officials worked to ensure that each soul received treatment appropriate to their situation, while maintaining the overall order necessary for governing such a vast and diverse population. Their duties included regular assessment of individual progress, mediation of disputes between souls, and coordination of the various activities that sustained life within the realm of the dead. The legal system governing interactions between the dead incorporated elements from traditional Norse law, while adapting them to the unique circumstances of the afterlife. Disputes between souls required resolution through methods that recognized their transformed nature and the different forms of harm or benefit possible within the realm of the dead. Property rights, personal relationships, and social obligations all required redefinition to account for the fact that traditional motivations such as physical need, material acquisition, and biological drives no longer applied in their original forms. The enforcement of laws within Helheim relied primarily on moral authority and social pressure rather than physical coercion, since the dead possessed different vulnerabilities and capabilities than the living. Punishment for serious infractions typically involved temporary or permanent relocation to less desirable regions of the realm, while rewards for exemplary conduct could result in improved living conditions or increased responsibilities within the administrative hierarchy. The ultimate sanction available to Hel involved complete exclusion from the social structures of Helheim, leaving offending souls to wander the most desolate regions of Niflheim in isolation from their fellows. The rituals and customs observed by the dead served multiple functions within Helheim's social structure, providing continuity with mortal traditions while adapting them to the circumstances of the afterlife. Seasonal celebrations continued according to patterns established during life, but their focus shifted from agricultural concerns to commemoration of the cycles of existence and death that governed cosmic order. Wedding ceremonies joined souls who had found companionship within the realm of the dead, while funeral rites honoured those rare individuals who achieved the second death that released them entirely from material existence. Religious observances within Helheim reflected the complex relationship between the dead and the divine powers that governed their existence. While souls no longer required the protection and assistance from gods that had been necessary during mortal life, they maintained reverence for the cosmic forces that determined their ultimate fate. Hel herself received particular veneration as the immediate authority governing their existence, but the dead also honoured Odin, Freya, and other deities whose decisions affected the broader cosmic order within which Helheim functioned. The educational systems within Hel's realm provided opportunities for souls to acquire knowledge and skills that had been unavailable during their mortal existence, reflecting the Norse belief that death represented transformation rather than termination. Schools staffed by the wisest of the dead offered instruction in subjects ranging from practical crafts to advanced magical theory, while libraries containing the accumulated wisdom of all who had ever lived provided resources for independent study and research. The economic systems governing exchange and cooperation among the dead operated according to principles that transcended the material limitations of mortal commerce. Since the dead no longer required food, shelter, or other physical necessities in the same way as the living, the economic activities focused on the exchange of services, knowledge, and social recognition. Skilled craftsmen traded their expertise for access to rare materials or advanced techniques, while those who possessed knowledge of particular subjects shared their wisdom in exchange for instruction in areas where their own understanding remained limited. The cosmic equilibrium that had governed the relationships between gods, giants, and the forces of fate faced its most severe disruption when Balder the Beautiful, son of Odin and Frigg, began experiencing prophetic dreams that foretold his own death. These visions arrived without warning during what should have been the most peaceful period of his existence, transforming his nights from restful slumber into terrifying glimpses of darkness and dissolution, that shook the very foundations of divine confidence in their ability to control destiny. Baldur's dreams possessed the unmistakable quality of true prophecy, carrying the weight of inevitable truth that distinguished genuine visions from ordinary nightmares or anxious fantasies. In these nocturnal revelations, he witnessed his own death occurring through various means, each vision more disturbing than the last. The dreams showed him falling to weapons wielded by unknown hands, succumbing to poisons that no healing could counteract, and perishing through accidents that seemed to arise from the very fabric of reality, turning against him. Most troubling of all, the visions revealed that his death would serve as a catalyst for events leading directly to Ragnarok, making his mortality not merely a personal tragedy, but a cosmic catastrophe of unprecedented proportions. The psychological impact of these prophetic dreams upon Baldur created visible changes in the god who had previously embodied joy, beauty, and radiant vitality throughout the 9 worlds. His luminous appearance, which had served as a source of comfort and inspiration to both gods and mortals, began to dim as the weight of prophetic knowledge pressed upon his consciousness. The golden hair that had caught and reflected light like spun sunbeams lost its brilliance, while his eyes, formerly bright with enthusiasm for existence, took on the haunted quality of one who had glimpsed his own ending. The transformation in Baldur's demeanour affected the entire divine community, creating an atmosphere of unease that permeated every hall and gathering place in Asgard. Gods who had grown accustomed to Baldur's presence as a stabilising influence found themselves struggling to maintain their usual confidence in the face of his obvious distress. The younger deities, particularly those who looked to Baldur as an example of divine perfection, experienced their first serious doubts about the permanence and security of their elevated existence. Frigg's response to her son's prophetic dreams demonstrated both the fierce protectiveness of divine motherhood and the sophisticated understanding of cosmic law that characterized the Queen of the Aesir. Rather than dismissing the visions as mere nightmares or attempting to comfort Baldur with false reassurances, she immediately recognized the genuine prophetic nature of his experiences and began developing strategies to counteract the fate they revealed. Her approach combined practical protective measures with magical interventions designed to create barriers between her son and the various forms of death that threatened him. The goddess's first initiative involved extensive consultation with the most skilled Valur and seeresses available to the divine community, seeking additional insight into the specific mechanisms through which Baldur's prophesied death might occur. These consultations revealed disturbing details about the cosmic significance of his mortality, confirming that his death would indeed serve as the catalyst for the final dissolution of the current world order. The seer's visions showed how Baldur's passing would trigger a cascade of events leading inexorably to the great battle of Ragnarok, making his protection essential not merely for personal reasons, but for the survival of everything the gods had created. Armed with this knowledge, Frigg embarked upon one of the most ambitious magical undertakings recorded in Norse mythology: the systematic extraction of oaths from every entity in existence, binding them never to harm her beloved son. This project required her to travel throughout all 9 worlds, approaching every category of being from the mightiest gods to the smallest insects, securing their solemn promises to refrain from any action that might bring harm to Baldur. The oath-taking process began with the most obvious sources of potential danger, including weapons of all types from the legendary swords of heroes to the simple knives used by farmers and craftsmen. Frigg's conversations with these implements required her to address them as conscious entities capable of making moral choices, reflecting the Norse understanding that all objects possessed some degree of spiritual essence that could be influenced through proper magical techniques. The weapon's oaths typically involved promises to turn aside from Baldur's flesh, to lose their sharpness when directed against him, or to refuse to function entirely if wielded with intent to harm the beautiful god. The negotiation process with various metals proved particularly complex, since these materials form the basis for numerous potential weapons and tools that might pose dangers to Baldur's safety. Iron, copper, silver and gold each required individual attention, with Frigg explaining the cosmic significance of Baldur's protection while appealing to whatever consciousness resided within these elemental substances. The metals' responses varied according to their individual natures, with iron proving most reluctant to abandon its essential function as a material of war and conflict, while gold readily agreed to avoid any action that might diminish the beauty and radiance that Baldur represented. The animal kingdom presented different challenges for Frigg's oath-gathering mission, requiring her to communicate with beings whose consciousness operated according to principles quite different from those governing divine or human awareness. Large predators such as wolves, bears, and great cats possess sufficient intelligence to understand the implications of the oaths they swore, but their promises had to account for the instinctual behaviours that might override conscious intentions during moments of excitement or territorial defence. Smaller creatures required different approaches, with Frigg often addressing entire species through their collective consciousness rather than attempting to secure individual promises from countless separate beings. The Plant Kingdom's participation in Frigg's protective scheme involved negotiations with entities whose awareness operated on temporal scales vastly different from those familiar to gods or mortals. Trees that had stood for centuries possessed memories and perspectives that encompassed multiple generations of divine activity, making them valuable allies whose oaths carried particular weight due to their stability and permanence. Flowering plants and agricultural crops presented their own unique considerations, since their life cycles involved constant death and renewal that complicated their ability to make permanent commitments regarding harm or protection. Even the elements themselves fell within the scope of Frigg's comprehensive protective effort, requiring her to secure oaths from fire, water, earth, and air in all their various manifestations. Fire's oath proved most difficult to obtain given its fundamental nature as a force of destruction and transformation, but Frigg's negotiations eventually secured a promise that flames would provide warmth and light for Baldur without ever consuming his flesh or causing him pain. Water agreed to support and refresh him without ever drowning or overwhelming his divine constitution, while earth promised to provide stable footing and fertile ground without opening chasms or creating obstacles in his path. The success of Frigg's oath-gathering campaign created an unprecedented situation within the cosmic order, effectively placing one individual beyond the reach of harm from any source within the 9 worlds. The magical protection surrounding Baldur operated with such completeness that even accidental injuries became impossible, creating a bubble of absolute safety that followed him wherever he travelled. This protection manifested in various ways depending upon the specific threat involved, with weapons turning aside at the last moment, dangerous animals becoming docile in his presence, and hazardous environmental conditions automatically adjusting to ensure his continued well-being. The psychological effect of this comprehensive protection upon Baldur himself proved complex and sometimes troubling. While the elimination of physical danger provided relief from the immediate fears generated by his prophetic dreams, the absolute nature of his invulnerability created a sense of isolation from the normal experiences that connected him to other beings. The spontaneous and natural interactions that had previously characterized his relationships with both gods and mortals became impossible when every potential source of harm automatically neutralized itself in his presence. The other gods' response to Baldur's newfound invulnerability evolved from initial relief and celebration into a form of entertainment that would prove tragically significant. The discovery that no weapon could harm him, no force could injure him, and no accident could befall him, led to the development of games and contests centered around testing the limits of his protection. These activities began innocently enough, with gods throwing small objects at Baldur to watch them harmlessly bounce away, but gradually escalated into more elaborate demonstrations involving increasingly powerful weapons and forces. The entertainment derived from Baldur's invulnerability reflected deeper currents within divine psychology, particularly the need to find meaning and excitement within lives that stretched across vast spans of time. The god's immortal existence often struggled with periods of boredom and restlessness that could only be relieved through novel experiences and challenges. Baldur's unique condition provided a new form of diversion that combined the thrill of apparent danger with the comfort of knowing that no actual harm would result from their activities. These games typically took place in the great assembly areas of Asgard, where gods could gather to witness and participate in the testing of Baldur's protection. The events followed informal but consistent patterns, with participants taking turns attempting to strike, pierce, or otherwise affect the invulnerable god using various weapons and techniques. Spears thrown with divine strength would veer away at the last moment, swords would lose their edges when swung toward his flesh, and even the mighty hammer Mjolnir would refuse to deliver its crushing force when directed against him. The spectacle of these demonstrations attracted audiences from throughout the divine community, including goddesses who normally showed little interest in martial displays and younger gods who marvelled at the visible manifestation of their elders' magical abilities. The event served social functions beyond mere entertainment, providing opportunities for divine beings to gather in relaxed settings, while reinforcing the bonds of community that held Asgard's population together during times of cosmic uncertainty. However, the repeated testing of Baldur's invulnerability also created an atmosphere of casual familiarity with forces that should have commanded greater respect and caution. The god's confidence in the absolute nature of his protection led them to become increasingly careless about the weapons and techniques they employed, assuming that Frigg's oaths would automatically neutralize any conceivable threat. This growing complacency would prove tragically misplaced when Loki discovered the single exception to the comprehensive protective scheme that surrounded Baldur. Loki's investigation into the source of Baldur's invulnerability began as an expression of his characteristic curiosity about magical workings and hidden knowledge, but gradually developed into something more focused and purposeful as he recognized the cosmic significance of the protection surrounding Odin's son. The trickster's unique position within the divine community granted him access to information and perspectives unavailable to other gods, while his shape-shifting abilities allowed him to conduct research through methods that would have been impossible for beings bound to single forms. The process through which Loki discovered Mistletoe's exemption from Frigg's oath-gathering campaign required both magical skill and persistent investigation that demonstrated his formidable intellectual capabilities. His initial inquiries focused on understanding the theoretical basis for the protective magic, seeking to identify potential weaknesses or limitations that might exist within even the most comprehensive magical workings. This research involved consultation with various sources of esoteric knowledge, including ancient texts, magical practitioners, and entities whose understanding of cosmic law exceeded that of the typical divine being. Loki's shape-shifting abilities proved crucial to his investigation, allowing him to assume forms that could approach Frigg without arousing suspicion about his true intentions. His transformation into the appearance of an elderly woman provided him with a persona that could engage the Queen of the Aesir in casual conversation while gathering information about her oath-taking campaign. This disguise required not only physical transformation but also the adoption of mannerisms, speech patterns, and cultural knowledge appropriate to his assumed identity, demonstrating the sophisticated nature of his deceptive abilities. The conversation through which Loki extracted information about Mistletoe's exemption from Frigg's protective scheme reveals both his manipulative skill and her tragic vulnerability to seemingly innocent inquiries. His approach involved expressing admiration for her magical accomplishment, while professing curiosity about the comprehensive nature of her oath-gathering efforts. The questions he posed appeared to arise from natural wonder about the scope of her work rather than from any malicious intent to discover weaknesses in her son's protection. Frigg's revelation that she'd considered mistletoe too young and insignificant to pose any threat to Balder reflected reasonable judgment based on the plant's characteristics and traditional uses within Norse society. Mistletoe's status as a parasitic growth that lived upon other trees without establishing independent root systems made it seem fundamentally different from the robust plants and trees that possess sufficient substance to warrant individual attention during her oath-taking campaign. Its association with fertility magic and peaceful domestic rituals further reinforced the impression that it belonged to a category of benign entities unlikely to serve as instruments of violence or harm. The plant's physical characteristics supported Frigg's assessment of its harmless nature, since mistletoe typically grew in small clumps high in tree branches, where it remained largely invisible and inaccessible to casual observation. Its soft, flexible stems and small berries created an impression of delicacy that contrasted sharply with the robust weapons and dangerous forces that had required careful attention during the protective oath-taking process. The traditional methods for harvesting mistletoe involved gentle cutting with golden sickles during specific lunar phases, emphasizing its connection to peaceful magical practices rather than violent applications. However, Loki's recognition of mistletoe's potential as a weapon against Balder demonstrated his understanding of magical principles that operated beyond obvious physical characteristics. His knowledge of the cosmic significance of exceptions and loopholes within magical workings allowed him to perceive how even the most insignificant oversight could create vulnerabilities within otherwise comprehensive protective schemes. The trickster's awareness that fate often worked through seemingly trivial details and unexpected circumstances led him to recognize mistletoe's potential importance despite its apparent harmlessness. The process through which Loki obtained mistletoe and prepared it for use as a weapon required both magical knowledge and careful planning that reflected his understanding of the cosmic forces at work in Balder's protection. His harvesting of the plant involved specific rituals designed to concentrate its natural properties while imbuing it with the intent necessary to penetrate the magical barriers surrounding his target. The transformation of a soft, flexible plant into an effective projectile required magical enhancement that drew upon Loki's considerable skills in manipulation and transformation. The selection of Hodder as the instrument for delivering the fatal blow to Balder represented a particularly cruel aspect of Loki's plan, exploiting the blind god's exclusion from the games that had developed around testing Balder's invulnerability. Hodder's blindness prevented him from participating in the throwing contests and weapon demonstrations that entertained the other gods, creating a sense of isolation and frustration that Loki could manipulate for his own purposes. The blind god's desire to participate in activities that honoured his brother made him vulnerable to suggestions that seemed to offer inclusion in the divine community's celebrations. Loki's approach to Hodder combined false sympathy with practical assistance, positioning himself as a helpful guide who could enable the blind god to participate in honouring Balder through the same activities that occupied the other Aesir. His offer to provide both weapon and guidance appeared to arise from genuine concern for Hodder's feelings of exclusion rather than from any malicious intent, making the deception particularly effective. The trickster's ability to maintain an appearance of friendly assistance while pursuing destructive goals demonstrated the sophisticated nature of his manipulative capabilities. The fatal throw that ended Balder's life occurred during one of the regular gatherings where gods tested his invulnerability, creating a context where the use of weapons against him appeared normal and expected rather than suspicious or threatening. Hodder's participation in the activity seemed like a natural expression of brotherly affection rather than an assassination attempt, allowing Loki's plan to unfold without arousing immediate alarm among the assembled gods. The blind god's reliance upon Loki's guidance for aiming and timing created a situation where the actual perpetrator remained hidden behind an innocent instrument. The moment of Baldur's death created a cosmic rupture that reverberated throughout all 9 worlds, marking the beginning of the irreversible sequence of events that would lead to Ragnarok. The failure of Frigg's comprehensive protective magic demonstrated that even the most carefully constructed defences against fate ultimately proved insufficient when confronted with the inexorable forces of destiny. The gods' immediate response combined shock at the unexpected breach of Baldur's invulnerability with growing recognition that this event marked the beginning of their prophesied doom. The aftermath of Baldur's death required immediate action to address both the practical consequences of losing such an important divine figure and the cosmic implications of fate's victory over divine will. Odin's decision to send Hermod on a mission to retrieve Baldur from Hel's realm reflected both paternal desperation and strategic calculation about the possibility of reversing what had occurred. The selection of Hermod for this crucial mission demonstrated confidence in his abilities as a messenger and negotiator, while the loan of Sleipnir for the journey indicated the supreme importance attached to its success. Hermod's preparation for the journey to Helheim required both physical and spiritual conditioning that would enable him to survive the transition between the world of the living and the realm of the dead, while maintaining his essential nature as a divine being. The magical protections necessary for such a journey involved complex rituals that drew upon the most advanced techniques available to the Aesir, creating temporary modifications to his divine constitution that would allow him to function within Hel's domain without becoming permanently trapped there. The descent into Helheim followed the traditional route through the roots of Yggdrasil, requiring Hermod to navigate landscapes that grew increasingly alien and challenging as he moved further from the familiar territories of the upper worlds. The journey's initial stages took him through regions where the normal laws governing time, space, and causation operated according to modified principles that reflected the transitional nature of the spaces between worlds. These areas served as buffer zones that gradually prepared travellers for the more extreme conditions they would encounter in the deeper realms. Sleipnir's supernatural abilities proved essential for traversing the various obstacles and hazards that mark the path to Hel's domain, including rivers that flowed with substances other than water, bridges constructed from materials that existed only in liminal spaces, and atmospheric conditions that would have proved fatal to ordinary horses. The 8-legged steed's connection to both the world of the living and the realm of the dead through his parentage enabled him to maintain stability and orientation throughout the journey while providing Hermod with the speed necessary to complete the mission before the cosmic disruption caused by Baldur's death created irreversible changes in the cosmic order. The encounter with Modgudur at the bridge Gjallabru required Hermod to demonstrate both his divine authority and his legitimate purpose in seeking entry to Helheim, since the Guardian's duties included preventing unauthorized access to Hel's domain. The conversation between Messenger and Guardian revealed the unprecedented nature of a living god seeking entry to the realm of the dead, creating a diplomatic challenge that required careful negotiation to resolve. Modgudur's eventual permission for Hermod to cross the bridge reflected her recognition of the cosmic significance of his mission, rather than mere deference to his divine status. The approach to Hel's Hall Eljudnir provided Hermod with his first direct view of the ruler, whose cooperation would determine the success or failure of his mission, while simultaneously demonstrating the awesome power and authority that governed the realm of the dead. The hall's architecture and the ceremonial protocols surrounding entry to Hel's presence emphasized the solemnity and importance of the negotiations that would determine Baldur's fate, while the visible presence of the beautiful god among the assembled dead confirmed both his death and his current status as a subject of Hel's authority. The negotiations between Hermod and Hel took place within the vast confines of Eljudnir, where the ruler of the dead held court surrounded by an intricate hierarchy of servants, administrators, and supernatural beings whose roles maintained the complex operations of her realm. The hall itself buzzed with constant activity, as various entities carried out their assigned duties, creating an atmosphere that combined the solemnity appropriate to the realm of the dead with the bustling efficiency necessary for governing countless souls across vast territories. At the forefront of Hell's administrative apparatus stood Modguder, whose role extended far beyond her primary function as guardian of the bridge Gjallarbrú. Her name, derived from Old Norse elements meaning furious battle or courage in battle, initially appeared paradoxical for a figure associated with the peaceful transition into death, but reflected the Norse understanding that crossing from life to death required its own form of courage and determination. Modguder's responsibilities encompassed not merely controlling access to Helheim, but serving as the primary interface between Hell's realm and the outside worlds, making her one of the most crucial figures in the cosmic order governing death and the afterlife. The Bridge Guardian's appearance reflected her unique position as mediator between different states of existence, maintaining the form of a living being while possessing intimate knowledge of death's mysteries that surpassed even that of most divine entities. Her clothing shifted subtly between the rich fabrics favoured by the living and the simple shrouds associated with burial, the transformation occurring so gradually that observers often could not determine precisely when the change took place. This visual ambiguity reinforced her function as a figure who existed simultaneously in multiple realms, capable of understanding and communicating with beings regardless of their state of existence. Modguder's questioning of souls seeking passage across Gjallarbrú involved sophisticated psychological and spiritual assessment that went far beyond simple interrogation or administrative processing. Her inquiries about the manner of each soul's death served multiple purposes, helping the deceased process their transition, while providing her with information necessary for determining appropriate placement within Helheim's complex social hierarchy. The Guardian's questions about family relationships, personal accomplishments, and unresolved regrets functioned as a form of spiritual counselling that eased the disorientation experienced by newly arrived souls while gathering data essential for their proper integration into the community of the dead. The Bridge Guardian's authority to grant or deny passage operated according to principles that reflected Hell's justice, rather than arbitrary power or bureaucratic procedure. Souls who approached Gjallarbrú with acceptance of their condition and respect for the customs governing the dead typically received immediate permission to cross, while those who arrived in states of confusion, denial, or hostility toward their circumstances might be required to spend time in the outer regions of Helheim until they achieved the psychological preparation necessary for deeper integration into the realm's society. This system ensured that only souls ready to accept their new existence gained access to the central areas where Hell maintained her court and the most important activities of the dead took place. Modguder's role in the cosmic order extended beyond her immediate duties within Helheim, as her position at the boundary between life and death made her a crucial figure in maintaining the stability that prevented the complete dissolution of barriers between worlds. Her vigilance ensured that living beings could not accidentally wander into the realm of the dead, while simultaneously preventing the deceased from returning to the world of the living without proper authorization. This function proved particularly important during times of cosmic instability, when the normal boundaries between realms might weaken or shift in ways that could threaten the fundamental order of existence. The Guardian's relationship with Hel herself reflected the complex dynamics that governed the administration of the realm of the dead, combining personal loyalty with professional competence in ways that ensured effective governance while maintaining appropriate respect for cosmic hierarchy. Modguder's long service in her position had earned her Hel's complete trust, allowing her to make independent decisions about access to the realm without requiring constant consultation with her superior. This delegation of authority proved essential for managing the constant flow of souls entering Helheim, while freeing Hel to focus on the broader strategic concerns that affected her realm's relationship with the other worlds. Within the halls of Eljudnir itself, Hel's most immediate servants included the enigmatic figures known as Ganglati and Ganglot, whose names revealed crucial aspects of their nature and function within the cosmic order. Ganglati, whose name translates to tardy or slow-going, served as Hel's primary manservant, while Ganglot, meaning slow or lingering, functioned as her maidservant. These appellations initially appeared to suggest incompetence or laziness, but actually reflected the profound philosophical principles that govern the operation of Death's realm, where the normal urgency and haste that characterized the world of the living gave way to different temporal relationships and priorities. The deliberate slowness that characterized Ganglati and Ganglot's movements and actions embodied the fundamental nature of death as a state that existed outside the temporal constraints governing mortal existence. Their unhurried approach to every task reflected the understanding that the dead possessed unlimited time to accomplish their goals, making the frantic pace that drove living beings both unnecessary and inappropriate within Helheim's borders. This temporal reorientation served important psychological functions for newly arrived souls, helping them adjust to their transformed relationship with time, while demonstrating that their new existence operated according to different principles than those they had known during mortal life. Ganglati's responsibilities encompassed the maintenance of Eljudnir's physical structure and the coordination of activities that supported Hel's court functions, tasks that required meticulous attention to detail rather than rapid execution. His work included the preparation of the hall for formal audiences, the arrangement of furnishings to accommodate beings in various states of corporeal existence, and the management of the complex logistics necessary for hosting gatherings that might include souls from across the vast territories of Helheim. The deliberate pace at which he approached these duties ensured that every detail received proper attention, while reinforcing the atmosphere of dignity and solemnity appropriate to the realm of the dead. The manservant's appearance reflected his unique status as a being created specifically for service within the realm of the dead, possessing characteristics that enabled him to function effectively in environments that would prove challenging for entities designed for existence among the living. His form combined elements of both life and death in ways that paralleled but differed from Hel's own dual nature, maintaining sufficient vitality to perform physical tasks while possessing the spiritual qualities necessary for comfortable existence within the realm of the deceased. This hybrid nature made him an ideal intermediary between Hel and her various subjects, capable of understanding and addressing the needs of souls in different states of existence. Ganglot's duties focused on the personal care of Hel herself and the management of the domestic aspects of life within Eljudnir, responsibilities that required intimate understanding of her mistress's dual nature and the special requirements it created. Her work included the preparation of clothing that could accommodate Hel's divided appearance, the arrangement of living spaces that reflected both the vitality of life and the solemnity of death, and the coordination of meals and refreshments appropriate for beings who existed in various states between life and death. The maidservant's slow, careful approach to these tasks ensured that every aspect of Hel's environment supported her effectiveness as ruler, while maintaining the dignity appropriate to her cosmic role. The relationship between Ganglati and Ganglot demonstrated the collaborative principles that governed much of Helheim's administration, with the two servants working in careful coordination to ensure that all aspects of Hel's household functioned smoothly, despite the complex challenges created by their unique environment. Their partnership reflected broader patterns within the realm of the dead, where cooperation and mutual support proved more effective than individual competition for achieving the goals that benefited their community as a whole. This collaborative approach provided a model for other inhabitants of Helheim, demonstrating how souls could work together effectively despite the different circumstances that had brought them to the realm of the dead. The symbolic significance of these servants' names and characteristics extended throughout Norse understanding of death and the afterlife, representing the fundamental transformation in temporal relationships that occurred when souls transitioned from the urgent concerns of mortal existence to the different priorities that governed life among the dead. Their deliberate slowness served as a constant reminder that death involved not merely the cessation of life, but the adoption of entirely different approaches to existence that required adjustment and acceptance from those who experienced the transition. Beyond these primary servants, Hell's Court included numerous other supernatural beings whose roles supported the complex operations necessary for governing the vast populations and territories under her authority. These entities represented various categories of the dead who had achieved positions of responsibility and influence within the realm's hierarchy, demonstrating that death did not necessarily mean the end of meaningful activity or social contribution. Former rulers, skilled craftsmen, wise counselors, and other individuals who had distinguished themselves during mortal life often found opportunities to continue serving their communities in new capacities that utilized their talents while adapting them to the circumstances of the afterlife. The administrative structure of Helheim required constant coordination between different categories of supernatural beings, each possessing unique capabilities and perspectives that contributed to the realm's overall effectiveness. Former military leaders organized and trained the armies of the dead that would march to Ragnarok, while skilled diplomats managed relationships between different regions within Hell's domain and negotiated with representatives from other realms when circumstances required such interactions. Scholars and wise individuals maintained libraries and schools that preserved knowledge while providing educational opportunities for souls seeking to expand their understanding during their existence among the dead. The judicial system within Helheim relied heavily on the expertise of souls who had possessed legal knowledge and moral wisdom during their mortal lives, creating courts that could handle the complex disputes and ethical questions that arose within a population encompassing the full spectrum of human experience and moral development. These supernatural judges worked to ensure that each soul received treatment appropriate to their individual circumstances, while maintaining the overall order necessary for governing such a diverse community. Their decisions reflected not only the legal traditions they had known during life, but also the deeper principles of cosmic justice that governed the relationships between all beings within the Nine Worlds. The military organization of Helheim's forces represented one of the most significant aspects of the realm's supernatural hierarchy, as these armies would play crucial roles during the final battle of Ragnarok. The dead who served in these forces included not only warriors who had failed to achieve the honor necessary for entry to Valhalla or Folkvanga, but also individuals who had developed martial skills during their existence within Hell's realm. The training and preparation of these forces required commanders who understood both traditional military tactics and the unique capabilities possessed by the dead, creating a synthesis of mortal warfare knowledge with supernatural abilities that would prove formidable during the final conflict. The various categories of dead who populated Hell's realm reflected the full diversity of human experience and moral conduct, creating a complex social structure that required sophisticated governance systems to maintain order and provide appropriate opportunities for different types of souls. Those who had died of natural causes without particular honour or dishonour formed the largest population group, engaging in activities that brought them satisfaction while contributing to the overall functioning of their community. These souls pursued interests and relationships that had provided meaning during their earthly existence, while exploring new possibilities that became available through their transformed state. The integration of different categories of dead within Helheim's social structure required careful attention to the varying needs and capabilities of souls who had arrived under different circumstances and possessed different levels of preparation for existence among the dead. Recent arrivals required orientation and support that helped them understand their new condition, while connecting them with others who'd undergone similar experiences. Long-term residents served as mentors and guides, sharing their accumulated wisdom about life in the realm of the dead, while helping newcomers find their place within the community's complex social networks. The relationship between Hel and other death-related beings in Norse cosmology created a network of supernatural entities whose interactions affected the fundamental processes governing mortality and the afterlife throughout all 9 worlds. The Norns, who controlled the threads of fate that determined when and how each being would die, maintained complex relationships with Hel that involved both cooperation and tension, as their respective roles sometimes created conflicting priorities. The Valkyries, who selected warriors for Valhalla and Folkvanga, worked within systems that required coordination with Hel's realm to ensure that all souls received appropriate placement after death. The supernatural beings who served various functions within the cosmic order of death included entities whose origins predated the establishment of the current world system, ancient powers whose knowledge and capabilities complemented Hel's more recent authority, while providing continuity with the primordial forces that had shaped the fundamental nature of existence and mortality. These relationships created a complex web of obligations and cooperative arrangements that ensured the smooth functioning of death-related processes while maintaining the stability necessary for cosmic order. The prophetic texts describing the final destruction of the cosmos reveal Hel's realm as one of the primary sources of supernatural forces that would ultimately overwhelm the gods during Ragnarok, though her personal participation in the battle remains deliberately ambiguous in the surviving sources. The armies of the dishonoured dead under her dominion represented a vast reservoir of supernatural warriors whose numbers far exceeded the Einherjar gathered in Valhalla or the chosen slain dwelling in Folkvanga. These forces, accumulated over countless generations of mortal death, constituted a military resource of unprecedented scale that would fundamentally alter the balance of power during the final confrontation between order and chaos. The composition of Hel's armies reflected the complex social hierarchies that governed her realm, with different categories of the dead contributing various capabilities to the overall military effort. Warriors who had died without achieving the honour necessary for entry to the halls of the gods formed the core of these forces, bringing combat experience tempered by the unique perspectives that came from existing in the liminal space between life and death. Their supernatural nature granted them advantages unavailable to mortal fighters, including immunity to many forms of physical harm and the ability to continue fighting despite injuries that would incapacitate living warriors. The recruitment and organisation of these forces required extensive preparation that began long before the actual onset of Ragnarok, with Hel's administrators identifying individuals whose skills and temperament made them suitable for military service, while providing training that adapted mortal combat techniques to the supernatural capabilities possessed by the dead. Former military leaders who had entered Helheim through natural death rather than battlefield mortality found new purposes in organising and commanding these armies, applying their strategic knowledge to the unique challenges presented by warfare involving supernatural beings. The training regimens developed for Hel's armies incorporated both traditional military disciplines and techniques specific to combat involving the dead, creating hybrid fighting styles that maximize the advantages of their supernatural nature, while maintaining the tactical coherence necessary for large-scale military operations. These preparations took place in designated areas of Helheim, where the landscape could be modified to simulate various battlefield conditions, allowing the dead to practice coordinated maneuvers while developing familiarity with weapons and equipment designed specifically for their transformed capabilities. The psychological preparation of souls for participation in cosmic warfare required careful attention to the complex motivations that might drive the dead to engage in conflict against the gods who had established the current world order. Many inhabitants of Helheim harboured resentments related to their exclusion from the more prestigious afterlife destinations, creating emotional foundations that could be channeled into military effectiveness during the final battle. Others found motivation in loyalty to Hel herself or in philosophical opposition to the cosmic order that had relegated them to secondary status within the hierarchy of the dead. The weaponry and equipment developed for Hel's armies reflected both the resources available within her realm and the specific requirements of supernatural warfare, combining materials harvested from the unique environment of Helheim with techniques adapted from mortal metalworking and craftsmanship. Weapons forged from metals that had absorbed the essence of death possessed properties that made them particularly effective against divine beings, while armour constructed from materials that existed only in the realm of the dead provided protection against both physical and magical attacks. The most significant contribution to the forces of destruction came through the construction of Naglfar, the massive ship built entirely from the fingernails of dead men, which would transport Hel's armies and other enemies of the gods to the final battlefield. This vessel represented one of the most disturbing and symbolically complex artifacts in Norse mythology, embodying the transformation of human remains into instruments of cosmic destruction, while demonstrating the inexorable accumulation of death that would ultimately overwhelm the forces of order. The construction of Naglfar required the systematic collection of nail clippings from corpses throughout Helheim over vast periods of time, a process that involved both practical considerations about materials gathering and deeper symbolic meanings related to the relationship between personal hygiene, social order, and cosmic stability. The ship's hull, masts, and rigging consisted entirely of these collected nails, bound together through magical techniques that transformed individual fragments into a cohesive structure capable of bearing enormous loads across the treacherous waters that separated the various realms. The symbolic significance of using fingernails as construction material extended throughout Norse cultural understanding of death, decay, and the boundaries between order and chaos. Fingernails represented one of the few parts of the human body that continued growing after death, making them symbols of the persistence of certain life processes even within the realm of the dead. Their use in constructing a vessel of destruction reflected the Norse understanding that death itself contained creative as well as destructive potential, capable of generating new forms of existence and power even as it dissolved the structures that had previously maintained cosmic order. The collection process for nail materials involved complex logistics that required coordination between different regions of Helheim and careful attention to the varying conditions under which different souls had died and been buried. Nails from warriors who had died in battle possessed different properties than those from individuals who had perished from disease or old age, creating a hierarchy of materials that influenced the ship's overall capabilities and symbolic significance. The most prized components came from those who had died violently or under circumstances that involved particular dishonour, as these materials carried concentrated essence of the forces that opposed divine order. The construction techniques employed in building Naglfar required magical knowledge that combined traditional shipbuilding skills with supernatural craftsmanship appropriate to the unique properties of the materials involved. The binding of individual nail clippings into larger structural elements required spells that could overcome the natural tendency of organic materials to decay while maintaining the flexibility necessary for a seaworthy vessel. The process involved careful attention to the orientation and arrangement of individual components, with patterns that reflected both practical engineering requirements and magical principles governing the manipulation of death-related materials. The ship's dimensions, though not precisely specified in surviving sources, clearly indicated a vessel of extraordinary size capable of transporting vast armies across the waters that separated different cosmic realms. The scale of construction required to accommodate such numbers suggested a project that had been underway for generations, with successive administrators within Hel's realm contributing to the gradual accumulation of materials and the refinement of construction techniques. This long-term commitment to preparation demonstrated the inevitability of the cosmic destruction that Naglfar would facilitate while emphasizing the patient, inexorable nature of the forces opposing divine order. The magical properties imbued within Naglfar's structure extended beyond simple transportation capabilities, incorporating defensive and offensive systems that would protect the ship and its passengers during the dangerous voyage to the final battlefield. The vessel's hull possessed the ability to repair itself when damaged, drawing upon the regenerative properties inherent in materials derived from the dead. The ship's capacity to navigate waters that existed between different states of reality made it capable of reaching destinations inaccessible to conventional vessels, including the hidden locations where the final battle would take place. The crew required to operate Naglfar consisted of souls who had possessed maritime skills during their mortal lives, supplemented by supernatural beings whose knowledge of navigation between different cosmic realms enabled the ship to reach its intended destination, despite the chaotic conditions that would prevail during the onset of Ragnarok. These navigators required familiarity with both conventional seamanship and the magical techniques necessary for sailing through waters that operated according to different physical laws than those governing ordinary maritime travel. The alliance between Hel's forces and other enemies of the gods represented a complex diplomatic achievement that required negotiation between entities whose motivations and objectives often conflicted despite their shared opposition to the current cosmic order. The giants of Jotunheim, led by figures such as Surtur with his flaming sword, brought different capabilities and perspectives to the coalition, while maintaining their own agenda regarding the shape of the post-Ragnarok world. The coordination of these diverse forces required sophisticated planning that balanced competing interests while maintaining focus on the immediate objective of defeating the gods. Loki's role as leader of the combined forces opposing the gods created additional complexity in the relationship between Hel's armies and the broader coalition of destruction, as his position as her father generated both advantages and potential conflicts within the command structure. His knowledge of divine weaknesses and strategic planning capabilities made him an effective military leader, while his complex relationship with both gods and giants enabled him to coordinate between different factions that might otherwise have difficulty working together. However, his mercurial nature and tendency towards independent action created risks that required careful management to prevent the coalition from fragmenting at crucial moments. The timing of Hel's military mobilization coordinated with other cosmic events that would weaken divine defenses and create opportunities for successful assault on Asgard and the other realms controlled by the gods. The death of Baldur had already begun the process of cosmic dissolution that would culminate in Ragnarok, while the binding and eventual escape of Fenrir created additional disruptions in the magical systems that maintained stability throughout the 9 worlds. These cascading failures in the cosmic order created windows of vulnerability that the forces of destruction could exploit to achieve objectives that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. The strategic objectives pursued by Hel's armies extended beyond simple military conquest to encompass the fundamental transformation of the cosmic order that would emerge after the destruction of the current world system. The dead who marched under her banner fought not merely to defeat the gods, but to establish new principles of existence that would provide different opportunities and status hierarchies for souls in the post-Ragnarok cosmos. This vision of transformation provided powerful motivation for warriors who had experienced exclusion from the most prestigious afterlife destinations under the current system. The march of the dishonoured dead from Helheim to the final battlefield represented one of the most significant supernatural events in Norse mythology, involving the mass movement of countless souls across cosmic boundaries that normally remained closed to such large-scale migration. The logistics of organising and supplying such an enormous force required extensive preparation and coordination that demonstrated the sophisticated administrative capabilities that Hel had developed during her reign over the realm of the dead. Supply lines, communication systems, and command structures all required adaptation to the unique requirements of supernatural warfare while maintaining the flexibility necessary for operations across multiple cosmic realms. The psychological impact of witnessing vast armies of the dead marching toward the final battle created terror and despair among the gods and their allies, who recognized in these forces the accumulated consequences of their own policies regarding death and the afterlife. The sight of countless souls who'd been relegated to secondary status within the cosmic hierarchy, now united in opposition to divine authority, served as a powerful reminder of the costs associated with maintaining systems of exclusion and privilege. This realization contributed to the sense of inevitable doom that characterized divine preparations for Ragnarok, as the gods recognized that their own actions had created many of the forces now arrayed against them. The cosmic significance of death itself as a force of transformation and renewal became manifest through the role played by Hel's realm and its inhabitants in the destruction of the current world order. Death represented not merely the absence of life, but rather a different state of existence that possessed its own forms of power and agency, capable of actively participating in the cosmic processes that would determine the shape of future reality. The armies of the dead embodied this understanding, demonstrating that death contained creative as well as destructive potential that could be harnessed for purposes that extended far beyond simple termination of individual existence. The alignment of death-related forces with other enemies of the gods reflected deeper patterns within Norse cosmological thinking that viewed destruction and creation as complementary aspects of cosmic cycles rather than opposed forces locked in eternal conflict. The participation of Hel's armies in Ragnarok served the ultimate purpose of clearing away the accumulated structures and hierarchies that had become rigid and exclusionary, creating space for new forms of existence that would emerge in the post-destruction world. This understanding transformed what might otherwise appear as purely destructive activity into participation in cosmic renewal that would benefit future generations of beings across all realms. The textual foundation of our understanding of Hel emerges primarily from two distinct but interconnected sources: the anonymous collection of mythological and heroic poems known as the Poetic Edda, and Snorri Sturluson's comprehensive mythological handbook, the Prose Edda, compiled in the early 13th century. These works present Hel through different literary lenses, with the Poetic Edda offering fragmentary but authentic glimpses of her role within the cosmic order, while Snorri's systematic approach provides detailed descriptions that have shaped virtually all subsequent interpretations of her character and domain. The Völuspá, the prophetic poem that opens the Poetic Edda, presents Hel within the broader context of cosmic destiny and the inevitable dissolution of the current world order. The Volva's vision encompasses the entire span of cosmic history, from the primordial void through the creation of the worlds to their ultimate destruction and renewal. Within this sweeping narrative, Hel appears not as a central character but as an essential component of the cosmic machinery that governs death and transformation. The poem's treatment of her reflects the ancient understanding that death represented a fundamental force within the universe, rather than merely an unfortunate consequence of mortal existence. The seeress describes Hel's role in Ragnarok through imagery that emphasizes her connection to the armies of the dead who will march against the gods during the final battle. The poem speaks of the ship Naglfar, constructed from the fingernails of corpses, sailing from the east with its cargo of supernatural warriors. While Hel herself remains unnamed in these specific passages, the clear connection between her realm and the forces of destruction establishes her significance within the prophetic framework that governs Norse understanding of cosmic destiny. The Völuspá's treatment of death-related themes reveals sophisticated theological thinking that distinguishes between different categories of mortality and their cosmic significance. The poem acknowledges the existence of multiple afterlife destinations, while emphasizing the particular importance of those who dwell in Hel's realm. This approach reflects ancient Norse recognition that the majority of human deaths would result in residence within Helheim rather than the more prestigious halls of Valhalla or Folkvangr, making Hel's domain the primary destination for mortal souls transitioning from life to death. The linguistic elements within the Völuspá demonstrate the antiquity of traditions surrounding Hel's character and function. employing terminology and poetic formulations that predate the systematic mythological frameworks developed in later sources. The poem's references to death and the underworld utilise vocabulary that connects to broader Indo-European traditions, while maintaining distinctively Norse characteristics that reflect the specific cultural context within which these beliefs developed. This linguistic evidence suggests that Hel's role within Norse mythology drew upon ancient traditions that extended back to the earliest periods of Germanic religious thought. Other poems within the Poetic Edda provide additional glimpses of Hel's character and domain, though these references typically occur within broader narratives focused on other divine figures or mythological events. The Grimnismal, Odin's catalogue of cosmological knowledge, mentions Hel's Eljudnir and describes aspects of her realm's geography within the systematic presentation of the Nine Worlds. This poem's treatment emphasises the structural relationships between different cosmic realms, while providing specific details about the physical characteristics of Helheim that complement the more narrative-focused descriptions found in other sources. The Grimnismal's description of Hel's dwelling incorporates specific architectural details that reflect both her dual nature and her status as ruler of one of the Nine Worlds. The poem names her hall as Eljudnir, meaning sprayed with snowstorms or damp with sleet, while identifying her dish as hunger, her knife as salter, her servant as ganglati, and her maidservant as ganglot. These names reveal the systematic symbolic thinking that characterised Norse mythological traditions, with each element of Hel's domestic environment reflecting broader themes related to death, scarcity, and the altered temporal relationships that governed existence within her realm. The symbolic significance of these household items and servants extends throughout Norse understanding of death as a state characterised by different relationships to physical needs and temporal experience. The naming of Hel's dish and knife after hunger and famine reflects the ancient association between death and deprivation, while simultaneously suggesting that these concepts took on different meanings within the realm of the dead. The characterization of her servants as slow or tardy emphasizes the transformation in temporal relationships that occurred when souls transitioned from the urgent concerns of mortal existence to the different priorities that governed life among the dead. The Baldur's Draumar, a poem specifically focused on the events surrounding Baldur's prophetic dreams and eventual death, provides crucial insight into Hel's role as judge and ruler of the dead through its description of Odin's consultation with a dead Volva. The Allfather's journey to the Underworld demonstrates both the accessibility of Hel's realm to living beings under extraordinary circumstances and the authority she wielded over prophetic knowledge related to cosmic destiny. The poem's treatment of this episode reveals the complex relationships between different categories of supernatural beings, while emphasizing the particular significance of death-related wisdom within Norse cosmological thinking. The Volva's responses to Odin's questions reveal sophisticated understanding of the cosmic forces that would lead to Ragnarok, with particular emphasis on the role that Baldur's death would play in triggering the sequence of events culminating in the destruction of the current world order. Her knowledge encompasses not only the immediate circumstances surrounding Baldur's mortality, but also the broader implications of his transition from the world of the living to Hel's domain. This prophetic framework establishes death as an active force within cosmic development, rather than merely a passive consequence of divine or mortal actions. The Helgakvida poems, which focus on the hero Helgi and his relationships with Valkyries and other supernatural beings, provide additional perspectives on the boundaries between life and death, while demonstrating the complex negotiations that could occur between different afterlife destinations. These narratives reveal that the assignment of souls to specific realms involved more than simple administrative processing, requiring consideration of individual circumstances and the competing claims of different divine authorities. The poem's treatment of these themes provides context for understanding Hel's position within the broader system governing death and the afterlife. Snorri Sturluson's prose. Edda represents the most systematic and comprehensive treatment of Hel's character and domain within surviving Norse literature, though his work also presents interpretive challenges related to his Christian background and his temporal distance from the pagan traditions he sought to preserve. Writing in the early 13th century for an audience already familiar with Christian theology, Snorri faced the complex task of presenting Norse mythological material in ways that would be comprehensible to his contemporaries while maintaining fidelity to the ancient traditions he had inherited through oral and written sources. The Gylfaginning section of the Prose Edda provides the most detailed description of Hel's physical appearance and the circumstances surrounding her assignment to rule over the realm of the dead. Snorri's account emphasizes her dual nature through vivid imagery that describes her as half blue-black and half flesh-coloured, creating a visual representation of the boundary between life and death that she embodies. This description serves multiple functions within his narrative framework, providing memorable imagery that reinforces her cosmic significance while demonstrating the systematic symbolic thinking that characterized Norse mythological traditions. Snorri's treatment of Hel's genealogy places her within the complex family relationships that connected various supernatural beings while emphasizing the cosmic significance of her parentage. His description of Loki and Angrboda's union and its monstrous offspring reflects ancient traditions about the relationship between order and chaos, while adapting these themes to his contemporary audience's expectations about narrative structure and moral significance. The systematic presentation of these genealogical relationships demonstrates Snorri's effort to create coherent mythological framework that could accommodate the diverse traditions he had inherited from earlier sources. The Prose Edda's account of Hel's assignment to rule Niflheim provides detailed information about the decision-making process that led to her elevation to divine authority, while revealing the complex considerations that influenced Odin's response to the prophetic knowledge surrounding Loki's children. Snorri's narrative emphasizes both the practical necessity of providing appropriate governance for the realm of the dead and the symbolic significance of granting such authority to a being whose dual nature uniquely qualified her for the role. This treatment reflects sophisticated understanding of the relationship between individual characteristics and cosmic function within Norse mythological thinking. The description of Helheim's geography and structure within the Prose Edda draws upon both ancient traditions and Snorri's own interpretive framework to create a comprehensive picture of the realm's physical and social characteristics. His account incorporates specific details about architectural features, geographical boundaries, and administrative systems, while maintaining consistency with the fragmentary references found in earlier poetic sources. The systematic nature of this presentation reflects Snorri's scholarly approach to mythological material, while demonstrating his commitment to preserving traditional knowledge within a coherent narrative framework. Snorri's treatment of the Balder episode provides the most complete account of Hel's role as judge and negotiator within the cosmic order, describing in detail the circumstances surrounding Hermodra's mission to retrieve the beautiful god from her realm. The narrative emphasizes both her authority over the dead and her willingness to consider exceptional circumstances that might warrant deviation from normal procedures governing the boundary between life and death. This portrayal reveals complex understanding of divine justice that balanced individual circumstances against broader cosmic necessities. The negotiations between Hermod and Hel, as described in the Prose Edda, demonstrate sophisticated diplomatic protocols that governed interactions between different divine authorities while revealing the careful consideration required for decisions affecting the cosmic order. Snorri's account emphasizes Hel's reasonable approach to the unprecedented request for Balder's return, while establishing the conditions that would make such an exception possible. Her requirement that all things in existence weep for Balder reflects both the cosmic significance of his death and the democratic principles that governed major decisions affecting the universal order. The failure of this mission, caused by Loki's refusal to weep in his disguise as the giantess Thok, demonstrates the complex relationships between individual actions and cosmic consequences, while revealing the inexorable nature of fate within Norse mythological thinking. Snorri's treatment of this episode emphasizes both the tragic nature of the outcome and its inevitability within the broader framework of cosmic destiny that governed the progression toward Ragnarok. The comparative analysis of poetic and prose Edda treatments of Hel reveals significant differences in emphasis and interpretation that reflect both the distinct purposes of these sources and the evolution of Norse mythological thinking over time. The Poetic Edda's fragmentary references preserve ancient traditions that emphasize Hel's cosmic significance within prophetic frameworks governing universal destiny, while Snorri's systematic approach provides detailed descriptions that emphasize her individual characteristics and specific role within divine hierarchy. The Poetic Edda's treatment tends to emphasize Hel's connection to cosmic forces and prophetic knowledge, presenting her as an integral component of the universal machinery that governs death and transformation rather than as an individual character with personal motivations and relationships. This approach reflects the ancient understanding of divine beings as embodiments of cosmic principles rather than anthropomorphic personalities, emphasizing function over individual characteristics within the broader framework of universal order. Snorri's interpretation, by contrast, provides detailed characterization that emphasizes Hel's individual personality and decision-making processes, while maintaining awareness of her cosmic significance. His descriptions of her physical appearance, domestic arrangements, and judicial procedures create a more anthropomorphic portrayal that makes her accessible to audiences familiar with human social structures and moral frameworks. This approach reflects both his Christian background and his scholarly commitment to creating coherent narrative frameworks that could preserve ancient traditions within contemporary intellectual contexts. The linguistic evidence within both sources reveals the antiquity of traditions surrounding Hel's character, while demonstrating the evolution of mythological thinking over the centuries that separated their composition. The Poetic Edda preserves archaic vocabulary and poetic formulations that connect to broader Germanic traditions, while Snorri's prose incorporates more contemporary linguistic elements that reflect the intellectual developments of medieval Iceland. These linguistic differences provide insight into both the historical development of Norse mythological traditions and the interpretive challenges faced by modern scholars seeking to understand ancient beliefs through medieval sources. The theological implications of different textual treatments reveal varying approaches to fundamental questions about the nature of death, divine authority, and cosmic justice within Norse religious thinking. The Poetic Edda's emphasis on prophetic frameworks and cosmic destiny reflects ancient fatalistic traditions that viewed individual actions as components within predetermined universal patterns, while Snorri's focus on individual agency and moral decision-making incorporates elements that may reflect Christian influence on his interpretive approach. These textual variations create interpretive challenges for modern scholars seeking to reconstruct authentic ancient beliefs about Hel and her domain, while acknowledging the valuable insights provided by both sources. The fragmentary nature of Poetic Edda references requires careful analysis to extract meaningful information about ancient traditions, while Snorri's systematic presentations must be evaluated for potential anachronistic elements that might distort our understanding of pre-Christian beliefs. The manuscript traditions preserving these sources add additional layers of complexity to textual analysis, as scribal variations and editorial interventions may have altered original meanings in ways that affect our interpretation of Hel's character and cosmic significance. The Codex Regius, which preserves most Poetic Edda material, dates to the late 13th century, while various manuscripts of Snorri's work show textual variations that suggest ongoing editorial activity throughout the medieval period. The comprehensive examination of textual sources reveals that Hel's significance within Norse mythology extended far beyond her individual character to encompass fundamental aspects of how Germanic peoples understood death, cosmic order, and the relationship between mortal existence and divine authority. Her role as ruler of the dead represented more than administrative oversight of departed souls. She embodied the complex theological and philosophical concepts that governed Norse approaches to mortality, fate, and the cyclical nature of cosmic existence. The archaeological record from Scandinavia and other Germanic regions provides substantial evidence for death customs and beliefs that align with the mythological framework surrounding Hel's domain. Burial practices from the Viking Age demonstrate sophisticated understanding of death as a transition between different states of existence, rather than simple termination of individual consciousness. Grave goods found in archaeological contexts reveal expectations that the dead would continue to require tools, weapons, and personal possessions in their new existence, suggesting belief systems that view death as relocation rather than cessation. The ship burials discovered at sites such as Oseberg and Gokstad in Norway demonstrate particular relevance to understanding beliefs about the journey to the realm of the dead. These elaborate funeral arrangements, involving the placement of deceased individuals within actual ships or ship-shaped stone settings, reflect concepts about maritime travel to otherworldly destinations that connect directly to mythological descriptions of souls crossing water barriers to reach Hel's domain. The inclusion of oars, navigation equipment, and provisions within these burials suggests that the journey to the afterlife required active participation from the deceased rather than passive transport by supernatural agents. The presence of bridges in Scandinavian archaeological contexts, particularly those associated with burial sites and ritual locations, provides physical evidence for beliefs about threshold crossings that parallel the mythological descriptions of Gjallerbru and Modgud's guardianship. Stone bridges and wooden walkways found near burial grounds appear to have served ceremonial functions related to the transition between life and death, creating physical spaces where communities could enact rituals that facilitated the deceased's passage to their new existence, while maintaining connections between the living and the dead. Excavations at sites such as Gamla Uppsala in Sweden have revealed complex burial practices that demonstrate the social stratification reflected in mythological descriptions of different afterlife destinations. The presence of elaborate burial mounds alongside simpler interments suggests that ancient Scandinavian communities recognized hierarchies among the dead that corresponded to the distinctions between Valhalla, Folkvanga, and Helheim described in literary sources. The material culture associated with these different burial types reveals varying expectations about posthumous existence that align with the cosmic geography described in mythological texts. The runic inscriptions found on memorial stones throughout Scandinavia provide direct evidence for beliefs about death and the afterlife that complement literary descriptions of Hel's domain. These inscriptions frequently reference journeys to otherworldly destinations, the continued existence of the deceased in new locations, and the maintenance of relationships between the living and the dead that required ongoing ritual attention. The language used in these inscriptions demonstrates continuity with mythological terminology while revealing regional variations in death-related beliefs that suggest local adaptations of broader Germanic traditions. The comparative analysis of Germanic death deities reveals that Hel's characteristics and functions connected to widespread Indo-European traditions, while maintaining distinctively Norse features that reflected specific cultural developments within Scandinavian societies. The Anglo-Saxon goddess Hel, mentioned in Old English sources, shares its etymological connections and functional similarities that suggest common origins in earlier Germanic religious traditions. However, the Norse development of this figure into a complex ruler with elaborate administrative systems and cosmic significance represents innovations that reflected the particular theological concerns of medieval Scandinavian communities. The Germanic goddess Nehelenia, known from inscriptions found in the Netherlands and associated with sea travel and death, demonstrates related concepts about feminine divine figures who govern transitions between different states of existence. Her iconography, featuring ships, dogs, and symbols of abundance, reveals theological frameworks that connected death to renewal and transformation rather than simple termination. These parallels suggest that Hel's role within Norse mythology drew upon ancient Indo-European traditions about death goddesses while adapting these concepts to specifically Scandinavian cultural contexts. The Celtic traditions surrounding figures such as the Morrigan and other death-related goddesses provide additional comparative context for understanding the development of Hel's character within Germanic religious thinking. The emphasis on sovereignty, prophecy, and the connection between death and cosmic renewal found in Celtic sources suggests shared Indo-European heritage that influenced the development of death-related beliefs across multiple cultural groups. However, the specific characteristics of Norse treatments, particularly the emphasis on administrative systems and legal frameworks governing the dead, reflect distinctive Scandinavian contributions to these broader traditions. The Roman accounts of Germanic religious practices, particularly those recorded by Tacitus and other classical authors, provide external perspectives on death-related beliefs that complement internal Scandinavian sources. These descriptions emphasize the importance of honor, courage, and proper conduct in determining posthumous fate, concepts that align with the distinctions between different afterlife destinations described in Norse mythology. The Roman observations about Germanic funeral practices and beliefs about the continued existence of the dead provide valuable context for understanding how these traditions appeared to outside observers during the early centuries of the Common Era. The linguistic evidence for Indo-European death-related terminology reveals the ancient origins of concepts that would eventually develop into the complex mythological framework surrounding Hel and her domain. The Proto-Indo-European roots that gave rise to Germanic death-related vocabulary demonstrate continuity with broader linguistic families while revealing the specific innovations that characterize Germanic religious thinking. The evolution of terms related to death, the underworld, and posthumous existence provides insight into the historical development of these concepts over thousands of years of cultural transmission. The analysis of Viking Age attitudes toward death reveals sophisticated philosophical frameworks that distinguished between different categories of mortality while emphasizing the relationship between individual conduct and cosmic consequences. The warrior culture that dominated much of Scandinavian society during this period created hierarchies of death that reflected broader social values while providing frameworks for understanding how individual actions affected posthumous destiny. The emphasis on honor, courage, and loyalty that characterized Viking Age culture created systems of meaning that connected personal conduct to cosmic significance. The concept of good death versus bad death that permeated Viking Age thinking reflected complex moral frameworks that extended beyond simple behavioral categories to encompass broader questions about cosmic order and individual responsibility. The distinction between weapon death and straw death represented more than preference for violent over peaceful mortality. It embodied theological concepts about the relationship between courage, fate, and cosmic significance that influenced both individual behavior and social institutions throughout Scandinavian society. The integration of death-related beliefs into broader cosmic frameworks revealed sophisticated theological thinking that connected individual mortality to universal processes of destruction and renewal. The prophetic traditions that described Ragnarok as the culmination of cosmic cycles emphasized death as a transformative force rather than simple negation, creating conceptual frameworks that viewed Hell's realm as an essential component of universal order, rather than merely a repository for discarded souls. The social functions served by beliefs about Hell and her domain extended throughout Viking Age communities, providing frameworks for understanding loss, maintaining connections with deceased family members, and creating meaning from the inevitable experience of mortality. The elaborate funeral practices and ongoing ritual attention to the dead demonstrated community commitment to maintaining relationships that transcended the boundary between life and death, creating social institutions that provided support for both the living and the deceased. The legal implications of death-related beliefs influenced inheritance practices, social status determination, and conflict resolution throughout Scandinavian societies. The manner of an individual's death could affect their family's standing within the community for generations, while beliefs about the continued existence and agency of the dead created obligations that influenced property distribution and social relationships. These practical consequences of theological beliefs demonstrate the integration of religious thinking into all aspects of Viking Age life. The artistic expressions found in Viking Age material culture reveal sophisticated aesthetic frameworks that connected death-related themes to broader cultural values, while providing visual representations of complex theological concepts. The intricate carvings found on memorial stones, the elaborate metalwork included in burial goods, and the architectural features of burial sites demonstrate community investment in creating beautiful and meaningful responses to mortality that honoured both the deceased and the cosmic order they had joined. The seasonal rituals and annual ceremonies that marked important transitions within Viking Age communities frequently incorporated death-related themes that connected individual mortality to cosmic cycles of renewal and transformation. The winter solstice celebrations, spring fertility rites, and harvest festivals all included elements that acknowledged the role of death within natural processes, while providing opportunities for communities to honour their deceased members and maintain connections across the boundary between life and death. The educational functions served by mythological narratives about Hell and her domain provided frameworks for transmitting cultural values while helping individuals prepare for their own eventual mortality. The stories told about heroes' journeys to the realm of the dead, the negotiations between living and deceased characters, and the complex moral frameworks governing posthumous existence created teaching tools that helped community members understand their place within cosmic order while providing guidance for ethical decision-making. The therapeutic aspects of death-related beliefs provided psychological support for individuals dealing with loss, while creating community resources for managing grief and maintaining social cohesion despite the disruptive effects of mortality. The understanding that death represented transformation rather than termination offered comfort to the bereaved, while the belief in continued relationships with the deceased provided ongoing sources of guidance and connection that helped maintain family and community identity across generations. The political implications of death-related beliefs influenced leadership structures and decision-making processes throughout Scandinavian societies, as rulers needed to demonstrate their fitness for eventual transition to prestigious afterlife destinations, while managing community resources in ways that honoured both living and deceased members. The connection between earthly conduct and posthumous fate created accountability systems that influenced political behaviour while providing frameworks for evaluating leadership effectiveness. The economic aspects of death-related practices required substantial community resources for funeral arrangements, memorial construction, and ongoing ritual maintenance that demonstrated collective commitment to honouring the deceased while supporting their continued existence in new realms. The investment of wealth in grave goods, monument construction, and ceremonial activities represented more than simple display of status. It embodied theological commitments about the nature of death and the obligations of the living toward those who had transitioned to new states of existence. Hell's significance within this broader cultural framework represented the culmination of centuries of Germanic religious development that created sophisticated theological systems capable of addressing fundamental human concerns about mortality, meaning, and cosmic order. Her role as ruler of the dead embodied community values while providing divine authority for the complex social institutions that governed relationships between the living and the deceased. Her dual nature reflected the Norse understanding that death involved transformation rather than termination, while her administrative systems demonstrated the community's commitment to maintaining order and justice even in the realm of the dead. The enduring influence of these beliefs extended well beyond the Viking Age, continuing to shape Scandinavian cultural identity and providing foundations for later religious and philosophical developments. The integration of death-related themes into medieval literature, the persistence of folk traditions about communication with the dead, and the continued importance of honor-based ethical systems all demonstrated the lasting significance of the theological frameworks that had developed around figures like Hel during the height of Norse mythological thinking. The comprehensive examination of Hel's cultural and religious significance reveals her as far more than a mythological character. She represented the embodiment of fundamental human concerns about mortality, justice, and cosmic order that found sophisticated expression within Norse religious traditions. Her domain provided not merely a destination for the dead, but a complete theological system that addressed questions about individual responsibility, social obligation, and the relationship between human action and cosmic consequence. Through her rule over the realm of the dead, Hel offered both comfort and challenge to those who sought to understand their place within the vast cosmic order that governed all existence, providing frameworks for meaning that transcended individual mortality while honouring the significance of each soul's journey through life and into death. Her legacy within Norse mythology thus represents one of humanity's most sophisticated attempts to create coherent theological responses to the universal experience of mortality, offering insights that continue to resonate with those who seek to understand the relationship between individual existence and cosmic significance.